Good evening, and thanks for joining our webinar on decoding the RBI's Model Risk Management Guidelines 2026. I am Renju Varghese, and I work as a leading tech security solutions here at SISA. So, as you know, the RBI draft guideline on model risk management guidelines was released on 24th June 2026, and it was open for the public comments, and the guideline closed for the public comments on 24th July, which was around 5 days ago. And hopefully we'll see the guideline coming as a circular at some later point of time. So this webinar is not a full walkthrough of this particular document, as I'm sure that there are a lot of other knowledge repositories on this particular guideline has been shared in the across. But what we want to give you in this webinar is basically a operational read, right? Where that actual real difficulty sits, and which the document doesn't states, and how as an organization, as a regulated entity, that you can go ahead in implementing those gaps so that when this particular guideline becomes a circular, you are ready. So before we get started, a few words about CISA. So CISA is a global leader in cybersecurity for the payment ecosystem, operating at the intersection of AI, cybersecurity, and payments. I'm sure that you could have heard about CISA as you are in the payment ecosystem, but we are also are both for AI for cybersecurity and cybersecurity for AI. For AI for cybersecurity, we had launched our agentic SOC solution, which is an end-to-end agentic AI system for detecting breaches and safeguarding your network. So if you have got the news that last week, which the OpenAI models actually broke into the Hugging Face, and Hugging Face was not even aware that they had been compromised, and it almost took 1 week for Hugging Face to know, right? So this actually shows the power of AI to break into every network part, and unless you have a AI to identify these identity misprivilege or identities misuse, you will not be able to identify whether your network has been breached. So that's where our agentic SOC solution called ProAct helps organization in protecting their environment. The second one, cybersecurity for AI. As a R&D team, we have actually developed a new platform called PRISM, which is a platform for AI security and governance, so that we can protect your ML models, your LLM models, your AI agents from these new attacks, and also help to ensure that your models are being governed. And as a global PCI forensic investigator, which covers across the globe. So as a global PFI, which is a PCI forensic investigator, we are one of the first firms that gets called in after a card breach. And as part of our PFI team, we actually do a lot of these investigations outside and understand, okay, how this particular new type of vulnerabilities works, on this new type of attacks works. And we actually use when we do a red teaming, we use a lot of AI models for doing an AI-assisted red teaming, and even for their DFI investigations, we use AI for our investigation purpose as well. So combining that, both our forensic expertise and our expertise on AI security, we are actually coming out this particular webinar to guide you on how we can go ahead and implement this particular RBI MRM guidelines. So there are both of us. I am joined by my colleague, Dr. Anjan, who is a PhD holder with 19 plus years experience across the industry and academia, and has filed 14 patents with 75 plus publications. One of the points to note is that out of the 14 patents filed, he has filed 12 patents this last 12 months, and all the 12 patents on AI security and governance aspect. So he's one of the best suited person to talk to you about this MRM guidelines. Myself, I have 2 decades of experience in cybersecurity, covering everything under cybersecurity, starting from the normal audits to forensic investigations, and currently is leading the R&D team at SISA called Leading Tech Security, basically building new solutions and service lines for protecting the future technology and future payments. So under the team, we have PRISM, which is an AI security and governance platform for protecting AI systems. We have quantum security to guide organizations on migrating from the current environment to a PQC environment, which is a post-quantum cryptographic environment. And we also have the first MPOC lab here in this region. So we got our hardware security lab as an MPOC accredited lab, which is the first MPOC accredited lab in India and this particular region. So in this entire webinar, we will cover the entire RBI guidelines, where I'll be taking through on what RBI means by a model, who it applies to, the governance and deterring machinery, while Anjan will going to take through the life cycle, the third-party models, and the AI-specific controls, which is more of the technical difficulty lies, and we'll talk about on how we can implement the same. Right. So I hope that we are audible and we're good to go. So let's get started, right? So the regulatory arc, right? So if you actually see in the last 12 months, so in the August 2025, RBI has released the free AI committee report, which was issued on 13th August 2025, and which basically covered on, it's more of a guidelines on how we can actually go with AI implementation. So the free AI committee report had around 7 sutras, which covers that trust is the foundation. The second one covers that it should be people first. The third one covers that, okay, the innovation over restraint, then the fairness and equity, accountability, understandable by design, safety, resilience, and the sustainability part. So these are the 7 sutras which the free AI committee report had shared, which had around 26 recommendations across 6 pillars like the infrastructure, policy, capacity, governance, protection, and assurance part. One of the points to note in the free AI report was that RBI's own survey, right? So in the report, the RBI had done its own survey and found that at that point of time, only about 21% of the surveyed entities were deploying or developing AI systems at that point of time. So what it means, if you see the RBI framework, is that they're actually not chasing the market, they are actually arriving ahead of it and guiding all the entities on how they can actually build their AI system. And the last 2 months has been really busy. So in last month, which is June 2026, they released 2 instruments. The first one was the RBI PSO AI advisory on the 1st of June, which was which was more in a mandatory language part and required the PSO to do a gap assessment with regards to their AI governance and using AI for cybersecurity, and having a board-approved action plan to implement those requirements within 2 months time frame. And then this draft, which is the RBI model risk management guideline, was is drafted on 24th June. This month, July, they released the draft on data governance guidance, which covers the data layer. And the data layer which is the internet of every model, and which is open for public comments till 17th August. So if you see, there are basically 4 instruments which has been issued in the past 12 months, and 3 of them within the last 90 days. So if you read it in sequence, this is not a document. It's basically a part of the RBI program. So it's part of the RBI Utkarsh 2029, which signals that how the further AI-specific requirements will be coming out. So Utkarsh 2029 is an RBI's own 3-year work plan. It's a medium-term strategy framework which RBI have from April 2026 to March 2029. And it covers on 6 pillars like robust regulation, customer-centric and inclusive finance, competitive market, effective technology, future-ready organizations, global India, etc. And under the technology pillar, RBI has committed on issuing this particular framework on the use of AI in the financial sector, alongside with developing an indigenous LLMs for its own supervisory functions and expanding the digital and AI sandbox. So this MRM draft itself points at the Utkarsh and how it's getting implemented part. So the question that most of you will be asking is that, hey, isn't this particular RBI model risk management guidance, is it only a draft, right? And why should we even consider it right now? Well, you're right. It's currently draft for consultation, and it doesn't create no enforceable obligations today, right? It's a guidance. It's not a direction. And when any RBI direction gets issued, then definitely that direction comes over this particular guidance part. But the question which I had to make is that if at any point of time, if you had a chance to go through the June RBI advisory on the PSO advisory, it actually echoes these principles and in the word of shall language, right? So this particular guidance is basically a template on how the RBI is going to come out with its future guidelines part, right? And as you know, in every organization, a real model risk management program, it actually takes quarters to implement, not just weeks, right? Because we need to renegotiate with the vendors, we need to have an independent validation team to be hired, an automated discovery solution has to be procured and deployed, right? And even a final circular comes in and it just gives you 90 days, like the current RBI PSO advisory, which only gave just 60 days for the organizations to implement a guideline part, right? So every organization that starts right now will definitely have a much head start in implementing these particular guidelines. So definitely every early movers converts this particular compliance into most supervisory credibility aspect. And just to from a SISA perspective, we do have our agentic SOC being deployed across payment ecosystems, right? And we have been asked to show how our agentic SOC is meeting all the AI guidelines and how it is ensuring that it is secure and it is properly governed, so that they can our clients in financial sector is using these informations to showcase to their auditors and their regulators on how their agentic SOC is AI governed properly. So we are already getting inquiries in. So, and when an RBI or any regulator comes for an audit, and if you say that, okay, we are using an AI system, then definitely they'll be asking questions on your governance stance, and all those particular governance questions will be based on or can be based on this particular MRM guideline document. So let's start with the definition. And it's a really crazy one, right? Because in the MRM guideline part, it actually defines what a particular model is, right? So in the guideline, it states that if an application or an algorithm or an analytic system which takes an input, which can be a data plus assumption, theoretical, empirical, any judgment-based inputs, and it processed or processing using any statistical, mathematical, or any financial techniques, explicitly including AI and ML part, and generates an output, which is a result, and that particular output is used in a business operation or decision-making process, then that particular application, algorithm, analytics is considered as a model as per the RBI MRM guidelines part. In the guideline, it clearly states that it covers algorithms, analytics, interfaces, applications, any decision-based rules, and any computational tools with any material impact on decision making, and irrespective of whether the entity recognizes them as models, right? So that's the very good wordings in the guideline, which says that it as a space, you cannot state that, hey, this particular decision-making system, we are not considering it as a model. It clearly says that, okay, you can't do that. If it covers this particular, it does this particular function, then by default, it becomes a model. So just to give an example, right? It's a example which is there in the guideline itself, in RBN's own illustration part. It states that if a spreadsheet based loan pricing calculator, which takes data like the browser, the borrower type, the tenor, the credit score, the collaterals in, the interest rate grids, the risk weight spreads and the margin formulas, apply to it to come out with a final lending rate out of a customer, then RBI says that then that should be treated as a model, right? So it's just not your AI and ML aspect. It also covers all your algorithms or all your decision-based systems as well. So just imagine, right, within your organization, how many pricing spreadsheets are there in your treasury and retail lending functions right now? Who owns them, right? And when were those algorithms or the formulas was last validated by someone who actually haven't built it, right? So that's something which RBI wants to cover as part of this particular MRM. And in the definition, it's very clearly mentioned that if the regulated entity states that, but we never called it a model, it's not an escape route. And the RBI has put that example in the draft precisely to close that particular escape route part. Applicability, well, if it's applicable to all the categories, including commercial banks aspect. So in short, if RBI regulates you, you are in scope. And there is no size threshold and there is no carve out, which is mentioned. And from an accountability aspect, the guidelines clearly says that as the regulated entity is accountable for the outcome of all the model it uses, whether that particular model has been developed internally or it is being sourced from a third party or a combination part, right? So as the accountability states, it states that if it's a third party model specifically, right? And if a decision is being taken by that particular third party model, the final accountability still lies with the regulated entity. So as a delegation, you can transfer the work, but you cannot transfer accountability aspect. So similarly, you cannot just rely on your vendor certification like ISO 42001 certification and state that, okay, the third-party model which has been used by your vendor, it's valid part of it. That will not suffice, and you need to undergo your own validation of the third-party models. So basic outcome is that whether it's a fintech partners or any third parties, if you rely on the output which is coming from that particular third-party models, then you own that particular outcome and you become accountable for the same. So if we just have a quick glance through the entire guidance document, it is actually covered under 6 chapters, where chapter 1 talks about preliminary, basically definitions and other details. The chapter 2 talks about governance and saying that, okay, there has to be a board approved MRMF. It's not MRF tires. It's MRMF, which is Model Risk Management Framework. It mentions that the chapter 3 states that, okay, you need to have a model risk management, which covers that, okay, you need to have a tiring system for a models. You need to have an inventory for the same. Chapter 4 talks about lifecycle management. Chapter 5 talks about specific models points, like a third party and ANML points. So in the chapter 5, all the points related to on how you need to govern your AI systems is covered in chapter 5. And the last chapter is basically the professional aspect. So the guidelines is basically a principle based, and it's not prescriptive. So the RBI is not going to tell you that how to tire a model based on the risk or what your validation methodology should be, right? So it sounds like, okay, you can choose anything, but in practice that you need to prove. So if there is a supervisor or there's a audit coming in, you need to justify the choices that you have made, right? On what basis that that we have approved this particular model, what basis that, okay, how we have classified that model into the risk tier aspect. So this tiering everything, we'll just come down into the further slides and we'll cover that in detail. So let's go into chapter 2, which talks about the governance, right? So in the governance aspect, it clearly states that the model risk management framework should cover these pointers in minimum, which includes your taxonomy, your governance structure, the scope of model usage, the tiering methodology, inventory, and the documentation standards part. And it covers the 3 roles and what each role should play, right? The first one clearly states the board. So the board should approve and periodically review the MRMF framework, which is the model risk management framework. It should approve the risk appetite and tolerance for each of the model risk, and it also approves all the policies, including the risk tiering policies aspect. Then we have the RMCB, which is the risk management committee. Right, yeah. So this particular committee can be the same risk management committee which the current organizations do have, and the RMCB responsible is to review the validation report for any high risk models and approve their deployments. Reviews the model tiering reports at least annually, and oversees the third-party and AI models and reviews breaches. So in this word, it's not security breaches, it is any AI incidents. So AI incidents like if the model has drifted or if the model's performance aspect. So all those details goes to the risk management committee. While the third role, which is senior management, is responsible for the resources, the implementation of the tiering part, and maintaining the model inventory part. So if you actually look at the risk management committee role, it says that every high-risk model deployed needs that committee's approval. And the validation reports on each of the selection of these models needs to reach them within 3 months of deployment part. So what is a high-risk model? We'll cover that in the further slide aspect. But one more point to note here is that not where the inventory sits, right? So the inventory actually in the guideline, it is named under the senior management obligations and reviewed by the committee part. And that inventory is not just an IT housekeeping aspect. So that's one point just to highlight here, the accountability part of it. Then comes the how the model needs to be reviewed, or the model risk management, the first step of the how the model needs to be accessed part. So the guideline clearly states that the model needs to be assessed at model level and at the enterprise-wide level, and say that, okay, you can have a 3-line of defense. In the sense, the first line is who determines that particular model, which is basically the model owners who designed it and who uses it on a day-to-day basis. So they first to detect and inventorize the model part. The second line is basically an independent MRM and validation. So this is a process, like it's an independent review of the models, and an independent person who is independent of development, ownership, and use of that particular model part. And the third line, which states that it also needs to be reviewed by an internal audit covering the framework and its operations aspect. So the independent review and internal audit is 2 different functions as per this particular guideline. So for most mid-sized NBFCs, we may not have a independent MRM team in place, and we may have to implement that same. So the one of the cadence to be noted is that the risk associated with that particular model is assessed at both at the individual model level and enterprise level on an ongoing basis, and at least has to be reviewed by the risk management committee at least annually or sooner before gets triggered part. So from an organization perspective, this becomes a critical role, because some of the models may have dilution aspect. Like, for example, if you're choosing a particular model which is determined for determining the giving a credit card, or uh, determining whether a transaction is a fraudulent transaction. So the risk is just not on model part. So you have to consider the model risk and how that particular model's output can lead to a further downstream application, or how the particular model can lead to a different system. That risk also has to be considered when you determine the model aspect. And that's where it comes to the next aspect, which is the risk-based tiering, right? So every model that you have determined has to be undergoing a risk-based tiering aspect. So what it means is that every model needs to be classified as a high risk, medium risk, and a low risk model. And it can be based on the materiality of the same, which is significance to a business process, financial and operational outcomes, or it can be a complexity aspect like difficulty of oversight or any other regulatory aspect. And the guideline also mentioned that the anti-dilution rule, which says that one factor may not offset another. Say, for example, you picture a simple rule engine which decides which which customer gets a collection call, right? If a card is not paid, which customer gets a collection call from the bank? It's just 2 lines of logic, right? there is no complexity is very low, but it touches every delinquent borrower that an organization has. So under an averaging kind of a concept model part of it, the low complexity part of it drags this particular model into a medium or a low risk category. And this particular draft clearly explicitly forbids that. And it says that the final tier represented particular model should represent the composite risk profile of that particular model. And just being that model be a low complexity, it cannot be get classified part into lower section. Now, it's one of the difficult aspects to implement, but if it's an AI model, if it's an LM or a ML model aspect, we have come out with a simple practical tiering test, which is basically our own tiering level, which can be used. So the question which we asked, right, if that particular uh, large language model or if that particular AI agent can take its own decision and can also act without a human gate, then that model by default becomes a high risk model, right? Which means if the system is completely autonomous AI agent system, then by default it is a high risk category. The second one, the model generates an output which materially shapes on how a human takes a decision, right? Or whatever is the model output is then acted upon by a human actor, then that model also comes under high risk, right? Because based on the model's output, the human is taking an action part. The third one is advisory only, just shares some few details like your customer agent. Uh, but it touches your customer or client data, then also it comes under a high risk category. But if it is an advisory model, but doesn't hit to any customer data or has no influence on the decision aspect, then it comes as a default low uh, low risk model part of it. Yes. Now the most important question, right? Inventory part. Inventory is the basic spine which entire guidelines covers, right? It's the foundational stone on which it relies on. So the draft requires that you have a comprehensive and up-to-date inventory of all the models, which is active, inactive, under development, and decommission part of it, right? The guidelines has a very good as a wording aspect, which states that no model may be used, relied upon, or deployed unless it is part of their inventory. Let me state, the guideline clearly states in the guideline part stating that no model may be used, relied upon, or deployed unless it is part of the inventory. And whether that model is in-house or third party, it has to be part of the inventory aspect. And it covers the minimum set of fields which is required to be included. And it also has mentioned that if you're decommissioning any models, then that model data needs to be retained for at least 10 years from the day it stopped serving or whichever is later aspect. So this is clearly gives you in details aspect. So one of the biggest challenge which every organization is facing or going to face is that these models gets shipped in the release train, right? So this model enter and change through your entire CI/CD pipeline, and it's not a governance calendar. So a quarterly survey or a spreadsheet will not able to help you with this particular moving estate, and that it just becomes, if it just using it as a spreadsheet, then it becomes stale the day it gets published. So you need to have a governance or an inventory tool or a discovery tool which can discover these models from the source code itself, right? Because it also requires dependency to be noted, right? Your upstream and downstream dependencies on these particular models, which lives in the code itself. And if any third-party model changes part, right? So if you're using either provider-driven updates, provider-driven models aspect, and the third party can just change the model before without informing you. So how you keep yourself updated part of it, right? So with a no inventory, we cannot not do it tiring properly, and without not doing a risk tiring, you cannot have a proper validation part of it. And without a proper validation aspect, you don't have a proper model risk management framework, which you can put in front of your risk management committee and the board. So all relies, the foundation is on that particular inventory, which has to be generated from the estate and just not collected from it. So with that, I hand it over to my colleague Anjan to take it forward.
Thanks, Renju. Thanks for the excellent foundation and the background, what you have basically provided on the model risk management and the beautiful way of linking the inventory with the tiring, and as well as how does it basically picturize in the model risk management. So any kind of governance structure, whatever that we look at, is largely on the technical control implementation of it. And that is where the entire show becomes very important to look at how this entire life cycle looks like. So the security journey and the model risk management journey, what is being stated from the RBI, is a very well drafted and a driven life cycle, which is justifiable by itself with validated on a particular clock, and it's watched over the entire life cycle of how it is basically being commissioned. So it's not that just the case that how the entire model comes in from a different place and gets over it and you validate it. It's a complete justifiable cycle, starting from the defined scope and rationale of why is this model basically being used, why is this being used, what is the level of fairness, accountability, and the bias which is basically involved in this, to a very important factor of a thorough independent validation, irrespective of where that model is basically from. Even if it is from the case of a third party entity, even it is so, that needs to be validated, triggered, and periodically checked for its correctness, soundness of the entire model, and a proper approval process to be defined with the authority, just like what we have looked at with the RMCB and other cases, to look at whether this can basically be approved and be a part of the entire defined documented rationale as a part of the entire ecosystem of the application. What becomes very important and very crucial to look at in most of the cases is there are a certain set of activities which we need to do prior the deployment, which we are looking at in the steps 1, 2, and 3. There are a set of activities which needs to be done once when a model is being deployed, or you have a AI application which is basically being deployed. And that's where it becomes crucial to look at the deploy and monitor. Why is this very crucial? Is basically because AI is a probabilistic in nature. It's not deterministic as your IT systems. And just like you have SIMs which do logging, the same cannot be used for your AI applications. They cannot monitor that. And that's where the ongoing monitoring becomes very crucial to understand how your AI applications are behaving, and are they drifting away from their intended task. And that's where it becomes very crucial to deploy and monitor as well throughout the lifetime of its being commissioned. At the same time, it also becomes important that over a period of time, the same model may not be used, and the model becomes obsolete, or it can get deprecated with the reasoning and the ability to do it much better. And that's where a change management get triggered, where there could be a lot of change that could be triggered, and this process is also requiring a thorough triggers of validations and approval process for it. It's not just you just plug out the old model and plug in the new model. So there should be some kind of a change management process that has a good rationale of why it is basically being changed, which that also looks out for the fallback and as well as the continuity of the entire cycle, where you manually substitute, backup, and orderly decommission the entire inventory based on why it's basically decommissioned over a period of time, let's say 10-year inventory retention, and then you're trying to decommissioning it. It's very important that at every stage of this particular life cycle, there are producible reports which gives sense to what each segment of this life cycle is talking about, and being presented within the RCMB to look out for the completion of each phase in a very independent, unbiased validation with a human coordination to ensure that all are tested with fallback for the day and the model doesn't fail. So the ensuring is on the model security aspect of it to ensure that it is all well grounded, scoped within the entire intended desire of what the model is basically required to function. And that's where this life cycle is valid and justifiable in its sense to it, and covering the entire scope of what needs to be covered for it. It's also important that the deployment reality becomes a very important challenge with the AI applications. The reason is quite simple. The way in which I tested the model at the QC is quite different from what it is trying to behave when it is a live application. And since it's a non-deterministic model, the drifting is something which is common. And that's where monitoring becomes an imperative part of the entire ask of this AI applications, that you monitor it. The classical algorithms are different. The large language models which are incorporated are completely non-deterministics. Their behavior shape shifts over a period of time. If not, we would have not seen newer models of GPT coming in or cloud coming in with it, with the different kinds of reasoning and different kinds of ability. And since the model drifts, the outputs are controlled and are designed, are very important with respect to it. There can be various reasons of the drift. It could be because of the data that is basically supplemented it, where it has slowly drifted over a period of time. It could be the reasoning has drifted over a period of time because of the updates, context, and the degradation of the model. And it could also be because the output has completely diverged from its intended outcome of what it was supposed to deliver. And the drift is wide and visibly seen with the business use case, and it is very well felt as well. And that's where it becomes very important to monitor your entire AI application and the model behavioral aspect of it, which is highly recommended for a high risk AI applications and models. And it's a best practice, as industry basically talks about a very well-known terminology called as runtime observability, AI observability, which monitors the drift, the explainable actions of the model of why it basically took that particular decisions, and also the agents. If there is something which is drastically being deviated out of its context, you need to have a kill switch to stop it and ensure that it does not further damage and cause a detrimental cost to the organization as well. And that's where this entire visibility of checking it is at the token level where we operate the model, and not at the log level as what SIMs operate in most of the cases. And the next chapter which we are looking at is many of the cases we see applications being developed and deployed to the client environment, but largely these applications are basically being developed by third party vendors who have these models. And the question of accountability basically comes into picture. And that's very important to look at the accountability when there is a third party involved in this. And vendors may not disclose certain things. They may keep it completely obscure, but the entire MRM basically talks about bringing the total visibility and transparency with respect to the, third party models, and not have anything which is opaque with respect to it, and also bring in the entire risk tires with respect to the compensating controls which are basically required for this, where the REs remain fully accountable for the third party. So if you are consuming something from the third party, you are accountable for it to ensure that the model outcomes are properly at the life cycle stage as what we saw. And with the due diligence before the acquisition is basically completed, it needs to prove its credibility methodology, the soundness, the entire validation aspect of it, who has audited it, what is the right set of contracts which are basically enforced on it, and it needs to be as per the industry standard formats which OASP and Cyclone DNX is trying to talk about for AI bomb, ML bomb, S bomb, and several other bill of materials, so that it's very clearly documented in terms of the inventory and the assets which are basically there in the entire ecosystem. That brings us to the very important focal point of the supply chain risk. This is a very important story of AI, that AI is typically a different types of application than what applications that we have dealt with so far. And the supply chain is very sophisticated, comprising of data, model, and libraries. Exposure to the model is exposure to everything that is underneath it, including the libraries, including the model behaviors, including the providers, many of the aspects which are there. And in the recent past, we have seen a lot of supply chain vulnerabilities with AI, talking about Light LLM, LangChain, and other libraries getting compromised with the models. And these limitations are something which does not isolate itself to a particular library, but rather it spreads across with a wider blast radius to the entire application, and causing the entire application to be compromised. And that's where it's very important to look at very important instruments and mission readable bill of materials, talking about the model card with the model AI, with the AI bill of materials, talking about the models, versions, and other aspects of it, which we call as model cards. And also the ML bill of materials, talking about the data sets, the featured pipelines, the artifacts from which these models were basically built, and obviously the software packages which are stitching them together with the frameworks, gateways, libraries, and other transitive dependencies as well. So there is a huge blind spot which is basically created. That is the model risk registry, which is this, which talks about what is underneath the model and how does the model basically look at, and what are the libraries that support it. And that visibility is something which is very, very important for every engineering team and the infosec team, which is looking very critically at the security of AI and looking at how these vulnerability basically states on a daily and day out basis, because certain of these can go completely unnoticed and be silently as a part of your entire application and trigger inadvertent vulnerability at some point of time. So that's the reason why this inventory and the supply chain goes hand in hand to give a total clear visibility of what's exactly there in your application. So what you can't see is what you cannot govern. And that's where the bill of materials plays a very vital role in bringing up a total visibility and the entire life cycle, what is being brought out by the MRM. It's very important that AI risk management, AI ML risk management be looked at. And there are several risk dimensions which is being brought about by the AI models to answer. And these are the factors which are basically being spoken about, not just in MRM, but also in OECD.ai and a couple of other forums talking about the AI model risk management, which talks about certain metrics and factors about how your model is behaving in terms of its reasoning, in terms of the explainability, hallucination, where is the bias, the overfitting of the model, spurious correlations, output variability, data risks, and the scope of the entire model. And each one of these risk dimensions that we are looking at has a very, very specific contribution to how your model basically performs, right? For example, if you look at the model decisions which is basically being made, why did your model make that decision? Can you give an explainable answer of why it is done? So the explainability is a very important control of why your model is basically trying to take this decision, which leads to a path of a responsible AI construct altogether. There are boundaries of models going beyond its control and designated aspects of it, And that's where it is very important to look at the hallucination when there is a client-facing GenAI applications part of it. More about this is available in the MRM document, which talks in depth about how the metrics are basically being measured. Guardrail is something which is very important and a control for every model that is required to look at it, because this talks about how your model behavior is at a very stressed scenarios and how it can break with the vulnerabilities and edge cases and the abnormal inputs which may not be tested during the QC time, and as well as the adversarial conditions where the testing is basically conducted for the models. Most of the model give away with their guardrails at a very initial phases when the red teaming activity is basically conducted, and that is where it basically evades all kinds of restrictions what is basically brought in for the model, and the controls are updated dynamically and automatically with respect to it, which is with the strict jurisdiction and as well as the data quality checks. Every wording is very important in this because this talks about how the model breaks away. The industry term in the red teaming world is called as jailbreak, which talks about how the model can be jailbreaked and it can be broken in terms of how it is basically being tested. And testing is not just a one-time activity, it is a continual activity to look at it, ensuring that the guardrails of the model is strong at every point, and also brings in a periodic attestation of these models with a sustained guardrail around this particular model, ensuring that there is a validated control over the model and there is no immediate or imminent prompt injections that are happening on the model with respect to it. Deployment and oversight is something which is very important for a customer facing AI applications where the guardrails are intact and there is a continuous human in the loop, which is always there in the entire environment, where the customer facing AI must look at controls against prompt injections, the adversarial inputs, maybe with the control of a LLM firewall or a guardrail layer, which looks at a reactive setup of ensuring that they block this, and also look at the limiting of the rates in terms of the context and as well as the session, and detection of anomalous usage, and perhaps include the disclosure with respect to AI that you are interacting with an AI system with limitations, and a human assisted options and requests with respect to it. And every actions that is basically looked at should have a human oversight that includes in this arrangement, and that ensures that there is a possible override option given to the human to override that particular AI decision and see what could be right for that particular scenario or the circumstance what we are talking about. And also the control for automation, bias, over reliance, and the decision fatigue, which basically is a common problem in the model, can also be overlooked by the human, so that this can basically be marked for a retuning of the model or a fresh usage of a different model, which when the model enters into that particular phase. From reading to the readiness, it's very important that it's a complete pragmatic journey of 90 days, where it stands from the final text to where it basically lands in a technical implementation of it. As rightly covered in the initial part by Renju, it is very important to see the estate and see how different models are there, different applications are there, and you can also see which of them are whitelisted and which of them are shadow AI use cases which are there in this, which is also a very important concern today. And as well as the endpoints, the clouds, and as well as the SaaS-based AI models, going beyond the limitation of what a spreadsheet-based inventory can basically be looked at, and also look at the entire tier and frame part of it, which is a very important rubric for consideration in terms of the risk, and also anchored along with the entire MRMF aspect of how it basically brings in this entire aspect. Fixing the vendor gap is something which is very important to have a very clear visibility of what you are trying to use. It's as good as knowing your customers. You need to know your AI systems. And that's where you can prove the worth of what it is and ensure that there is a baseline monitoring for high risk AI applications, red teams, and also the customer facing AI applications. And the board is ready to take it up at any kind of approval that is required for it. With structural roadblocks which can basically be seen with the model discovery and the AI observability part of it, which could solve the entire problem and the rest of the management as what we see in the MRMS side. So this brings the series to not to one off, but an instrument that's very important as what is being started in the initial set of slides with the draft MRM guidance, not just only talking about the draft, but becoming an actual reality in the coming future. And also looking at the PSO's AI advisories and multiple advisories coming up in the last 90 days, talking about how real are we getting towards the AI adoption in a very secure and a responsible way, and building the model data and the AI security foundations and comply with multiple different times with multiple different regulations, what we are looking at. And this is something which is going to come in the next couple of days with a lot of things coming across with the governance aspect of it. So same controls, different verbs, multiple other governance models that globally, if I take the examples of AI governance, there could be hardly somewhere around 19 to 20 different governance structures. And most of them talks more or less the same kind of terminologies, same controls, but the nomenclature or the verbatim used is slightly different. It's the same governance and the security framework, the classifications of ownership, life cycle, and other aspects, the model inventory part of it, the AI agent being tested because the non-human identities are something which is crucial today. And what are they basically trying to access? What are they basically scoped? What tools are they basically trying to access? Periodic review and access with respect to that, third party risk management, and as well as the output validation, and as well as the adversarial testing part of it, which becomes a very important aspect with respect to the guidance. So how CISA can help in one control loop with many mandates is something like this. We have a PRISM, which is a suite of solutions covering the inventory, the red teaming, the model observability, and the live governance part of it, which covers the multiple chapters as what we have discussed. We can explore this at a different point, and do please feel free to visit us in the site to get more insights of it. So which of your models would the superior ask for a high risk? So we need to talk about the high risk running in your enterprise and how to govern them before the final text asks you for. So with that, we are now open for Q&A. And also, I would also request all the participants who are connected live to please take up the poll, which is coming up in a few seconds from now, and also kindly respond to that particular poll. We are now open for the questions.
Sure. So for the questions, we have the Q&A section where you can just type in your questions. So we have the first question, which from Malini, which states that if a cybersecurity tool uses AI logic in background, does it still have to be covered as part of risk assessment? Well, the answer is yes. So the guidance document states that uh, every model deployed within your environment, you need to cover as part of the risk assessment framework part, irrespective of whether it's only used for a business operations or whether it's for security operations or for making any other decision aspect. So the model has to go classify under risk, has to be inventorized, and then from the classify under which risk category it falls under. So as it doesn't falls under the if your AI is the using the cybersecurity is actually going to take a decision, like it has the capability of connecting to your SOAR and taking a decision aspect, then it comes under high risk. But it's only used to give you a notification part, and where the team takes a decision, then it can become under the medium risk or the low risk aspect. So, but it just gets covered. The second question is that is the SOC 2 report of is an acceptable evidence from the vendor covering the AI risk and controls? Well, the answer is no, because SOC 2 is basically an IT aspect. It doesn't cover the AI risk and controls. Please note that AI risk is totally different from your IT risk aspects, right? So that's the reason why there's all these guidance documents and everything coming in. Your IT systems and AI systems has total two different functionalities. The same set of vulnerabilities or the same set of testing which we actually do it on in our IT and application systems. For an AI system, you need to undergo different type altogether. So the aspects of covering the AI risk and control, but just based on SOC 2 report, will not suffice. What you can ask for your vendors is definitely an ISO 42001 certifications aspect, but 42001 is also a very high level part of it. So what we as an organization that we see is that the clients drafting their own guidelines and the questionnaire aspect regarding AI guidance aspect, and then asking those evidences and details from us. So maybe you can use this particular MRM guidance itself to create your own guidelines and questionnaires, which you can share with your third parties and vendors part. Then the other question is does a spreadsheet really count? Right. So Anjan, say that if I'm using a spreadsheet for my inventory, does it really count?
Well, spreadsheet is just a manual reference for you, all right? It's never going to comprehensively cover everything what is required. You need to look at for every look and corner of what inventory that you are trying to cover. And you may manually have listed certain things, but it's very important to cover each and every assets that is required for it. And that's where it's different.
So we have other question which states that what is the difference between the RBI advisory on AI accelerated cyber threats and related safeguards and this particular webinar, so which is the AI advisory on the uh, PSU's part?
Sure. So these two aspects are completely different. AI accelerated cyber threats are different from the AI threats itself. So you are talking about AI accelerated attacks which are happening on your IT systems. That is something which is different from what is happening within your AI application itself, and how your AI applications are susceptible for any kind of attacks. So again, coming back to the same point as what Ranju said, if you look at a Venn diagram of IT systems and AI systems, these two circles don't concentrically merge at any point of time. They look at separately and differently and distinctly with respect to that.
And the AI advisory on which RBI said also states that so you have to it has two sections, section 4 and section 5. Section 4 covers on how you need to use AI for cybersecurity, right? So how you need to have a AI for your monitoring aspect, how you need to replicate a AI kind of a pen test, so that you can replicate how the intruders actually use AI and test your environment aspect. While section 5 talks about AI for cybersecurity. Sorry, cybersecurity for AI. Section 4 on AI for cybersecurity, section 5 on cybersecurity for AI, which talks about how you need to protect your AI systems. So this particular webinar covers that section 5 aspect on how to protect your AI systems part. The next question is is AI security can be related to DLP? There are two different points, right? DLP is your data uh, uh, data being shared across. So in the AI aspect, right? So if you have your allowed your users to use GPTs, cloud, and etc., your DLP program is that, okay, whether your users have using or have shared any confidential data to these particular proprietary AI models aspect, right? How do you able to prevent that from, or prevent from uploading AI files, or prevent them from sharing those confidential data as part of the chat? While here in AI systems aspect, it is on how the models that you deploy within your application. So what we call as using AI by users, or the user AI aspect, which is basically users or employees using AI for their uh, like say marketing team using it, or dev team using it for developing the code aspect. And it is the first application, AI application, which means that applications running in your environment has an AI system implemented, right? Or if your team uses any autonomous platform, or like any 10 platforms which cannot is used for automating the various tasks, how AI has been integrated into those particular platforms gets covered, and how those platforms is interacting with your data, how is the data being protected so that these platforms have limited access, is two different aspects altogether. So the LP is mainly for on how the users use AI, and not for completely on AI security. The AI security is a much bigger aspect. So the next question is, I'm interested to know if compliance include strategies for transition to PQC standards. In the current RBI guidelines, it's not talks about any PQC standard comes in. So DSCI has released one guidance note on PQC migration, and they have mentioned 2034 for the PQC migration to be completed. So currently, RBI has not come out with any guidance note on PQC migrations, but hope it will come out soon, because the PQC migration, especially for the payment ecosystem, is going to be take quite a lot of our effort and time, because all our systems needs to get migrated, which requires a lot of our legacy applications, our ATMs, post terminals, key management in all those terminals. It's going to be a much bigger exercise. So currently, there's no guidelines or a framework which RP have shared. Uh, the other question is a verification body or a certification body accountable in case of missing out on significant AI risk, or does any legal liability include for that particular certification body? Well, in the guidance note, that accountability is with the regulated entity itself. It's not with your third party or a certification body aspect, right? So if you read that initial section on accountable aspect, they have clearly put the accountability to the regulated entity and accountability to the board, the risk management committee, and the senior management aspect. So accountability has not been moved to any third party part. So to miss saying that, okay, we have missed out on significant AI risk aspect. No, it's with the regulated entities itself, and that's very clear in the guidance note. Is there any tool or methodology to perform vulnerability assessment for prompt injection? And are there any hardening guidelines if you're building LLM model in-house? Anjan?
Yeah, I think I mean there are a lot many tools which are available in the open space which are trying to do for vulnerability assessments. And if you look at the entire OWASP red teaming aspect as well, there are multiple set of tools which are there, and inclusive of the LLM models that you're talking about, which are in the open space and in-house being built. There are certain solutions which are there for hardening the entire model. In fact, CISA PRISM is one such tool which can do both the vulnerability assessment in terms of the red teaming of the model, and as well as hardening of the entire LLM model if it is an open source with model weights being available for it.
Sure. Does any legal liability arise in case of a failure to report? Well, this currently is only a guideline right now. It is not mandated directive part of it. So currently, based on this, there's no legal liability is going to arise. But why we are doing this particular webinar is that to keep organizations and all our clients updated, saying that this is what is coming in right now. There is a one of our client mentioned is that okay, all these guidelines are good, but without any timelines. So when the timeline comes, instead of running right now, we can start immediately. So these are just guidelines right now without any timelines. Uh, the next question is that how does CISA support the AML model validation, explainability, and model governance part? Anjan?
I think that I have covered that in the previous question. We have brought in our AI security and a governance platform called PRISM, which can do this end to end, and that's where it can basically look in for the entire model governance, the discovery aspect. I have also spoken about it in one of the slides. In case if you are interested, you can drop in with your whole question as well for that. I think there is a last question, which is, will CISA provide a tool or a framework to help OEMs and application developer meet RBI's MRM expectations?
Oh, yes, we do. So we have our PRISM part, which can help you in entire uh, journey for your AI implementation aspect, starting from doing discover to discover all your AI assets across your organizations. Also with an options which the clients can, your third parties can also upload a Cyclone DX file so that instead of you reviewing the client or just getting a report from the your third parties, you can also integrate that into as an AI inventory part. And using that inventory, you can maintain your use the risk modeling, risk tiering aspect, and use it for your AI governance. So once you determine your inventory, then we have our called Prism Strike, which is a reteaming tool, which can be used for reteaming the models, doing GenAI application pen test part. Then so once the testing has been done, then if you want to secure it, there's two part of it. One is an LM firewall, which or secure fine tuning of the model itself if you're using any open source models that we have for Prism Secure aspect. Our LM firewall called Prism Guard is currently under the beta phase, and we'll be launching it in 2-3 months time frame. Then we have Prism Observe, which is an AI observability tool, which is basically is used to observe on how your AI agents is working, how your application is interacting with your AI models, and use it to determine how your models or AI systems is determining on performance, whether there is any drift happening or there's any security attacks happening on all these models aspect, which we use a part of it. And all this data then is been used for the Prism governance. So when uh, whenever clients comes in, so it is the entire end-to-end journey for your AI security and governance aspect, and it definitely helps do that. And if interested, you can just drop an email to us, and we'll be happy to schedule a demo of our Prism solution. And also, if we want, we also have our AI security briefing sessions, which is basically one-to-one organization sessions that we do to educate our clients on or brief on AI security and guide them on how they can implement these governance and security frameworks as organizations build AI systems within their organization aspect. So it's a 1 hour or 90 minutes sessions that we can have. So if you're interested, you can write to us, or I'm sure that you will be having interaction with some of our sales team member. We can reach out to them, and we can schedule the same for you. So with that, thank you all. Thank you for joining this particular webinar. It was a pleasure hosting you, and thanks for all the questions as well.
Thank you.